So we are officially now into the War Within, having been playing for around a week of early access and a few days of official release. And to be honest, I've been really enjoying myself in this new expansion, which was quite the relief, as it's the first retail expansion I've been looking forward to in a long time. So I thought I'd give some of my first impressions of the War Within whilst it's still pretty raw, on how I found leveling, the general zones, delves and dungeons, and the general vibe of the expansion. And as for the headline, I've really liked the War Within so far, so if you were hoping for me to trash this expansion, this video won't be for you. And honestly, it's quite nice feeling so positive about retail WoW for a change, especially seeing that a lot of other players are feeling this way too, and a somewhat metaphorical weight feels lifted off my mind. So let's talk about the War Within. Oh, and warning, of course there may be some spoilers in this video for the storyline, but I won't be going too much into detail for that, so take that as you will. First for me, the introduction to this expansion is pretty fantastic, and really sets up that the War Within is a pretty big deal and that this is serious stuff we're dealing with an opening scenario in Dalaran as it's invaded by Nerubians and Xal'atath, and well, I'm sure you've seen what comes next. But this for me really sets up your journey into Khazalgar pretty neatly, along giving that feeling that this is an epic sized expansion that did really remind me of how the expansion starts in Legion, that makes you realise the gravity of the situation at hand. And we're introduced to the Earthen pretty quick, who are a nice addition to the game and don't feel out of place. The Earthen are meant to sound quite robotic in their voice acting, however an issue is that a few of the Earthen are so monotone in nature they start to sound like Bird Person from Rick and Morty.
I believe you and your friends have much to discuss.
And whilst I love the introduction to the first two zones, and they look absolutely great, and the questlines are pretty decent, my lord, is there a lot of cinematics. I mean, the War Within is giving Cataclysm a run for its money for its overuse of cinematics. However, this does calm down the more you press through each zone. And to be honest, the questing experience when it's tied in with dungeons and delves, and I'll touch on dungeons and delves later, to me all is pretty satisfactory, and it's wrapped up in a neat story that does feel like it's the start of something, which is what the War Within is meant to be. Now overall, I was pretty happy with the questing experience we have, and once again, it's a standard Warcraft kill and collect a lot of the time, but the story for the campaign is really well told and woven into your experience, with some nice little top-offs here and there. For example, like when a little spider gives you a quest once it feels like you've ended a quest chain, which was something very high classic fantasy that I just loved about it, and it's these neat little touches that tie your experience together. However, at times it can feel like for certain chunks of the expansion, it does feel more like you're in a playable cinematic, and that you're just watching quests happen in front of your character. But again, this is a sort of peak and trough thing where it doesn't happen enough to ruin your experience. And my lord, let's talk about the zones. For me, the War Within really does nail zone design down, and I've enjoyed leveling in this expansion in terms of the aesthetic of the zones by far, since probably an early expansion. For me, the War Within zones do blow the past 5 to 6 years of WoW out of the water, especially Hallowfall, which feels like to me in terms of vibe, a huge version of Scarlet Monastery, as you essentially have evil paladins mixed in with some void corruption, once again classic Warcraft stuff. And the final zone where the Nerubians reside really does feel straight out of Wrath of the Lich King, and give that feeling of a pretty dangerous zone you probably shouldn't be in, and does indeed host the area for our first raid. And it was pretty interesting storyline wise in this area, seeing the Nerubians as a race instead of just an enemy, as they reflect the hardship for a lot of Nerubians being oppressed by Xal'atath, using their army in the name of void corruption, reminding me of the core essence for Warcraft in Orcs versus Humans. Two races that have always been enemies, actually have a lot in common when it comes to dealing with pride, humility, and what's best for their own people, and that seemed to go with the Nerubians as well, playing into the classic idea for joining forces with some of the Nerubians under the coax that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Now moving on to delves and dungeons. Delves are essentially smaller dungeons that you do a little task followed by a boss, and I've really enjoyed doing all the delves I've completed so far, and it's worth noting I've done them all solo and not part of a group, so my experience does hinge on that. Delves are quite samey in the aims that you do, much like dungeons, but we do have 13 of them at this moment in time, so there's good variance in terms of visuals, and I really like the system with Bran where he is your follower who levels up in the delves also. Not really had any issues completing them so far, but I can imagine the higher tiers we go, and the more they scale up, it's certainly going to get a lot more difficult. Yet, like mentioned, I love the system with Bran Bronzebeard, as he's been a staple of the game for so long now, and in the delves it throws me back to running Halls of Lightning and Stone in Wrath of the Lich King, so he's a great companion to have for the start of the War Within. I've had him as a healer so far who provides some helpful functions, but as a Death Knight I could probably solo heal the entire delve myself, but I imagine I'll get more reliance on him the harder the delves get. Bran is also pretty useful for some aspects of either leveling, professions, or simply making gold, as throughout the delve he will farm various mats for you like mining ores or gathering herbs, which I've made a decent bit of gold selling on the auction house. So this far the XP rewards and progression of each delves has been satisfying, and I love that I can run these solo in between dungeons or questing or farming renown, which is a nice way to switch things up or try out new aspects to my class. Yet obviously the worry is that delves have the potential to become a bit tedious or samey over time, so I'm trying to keep that in mind and not over farm them at this moment. And with the new dungeons, it's very similar to the note of delves. They're designed very well besides one particular airship dungeon in Hallowfall, which I'll allow you to discover yourself. It's horrible, but there is a great variance to the rest of the dungeons, which are all very fun and feel pretty satisfying to progress through and complete. There have been some scaling issues when you're leveling, however, where from 70 to 80 certain classes are broken, being able to spam about 2 abilities and smash out 2 million DPS. Seeing this mostly with rogues, which can be a bit irritating when you're running the normal dungeons, where at level 80 you'd be doing 1/10 of the damage of a level 70, but that's more to do with level scaling design rather than the dungeons themselves. And as I've moved on to heroic dungeons, this isn't an issue anymore, and running heroic dungeons has been great fun. And once again, dungeons have a real feel of Warcraft about them, especially like mentioned certain ones in Hallowfall that make me feel like they have the essence of Scarlet Monastery in them, with some warriors of the light who have turned slightly evil in the name of fighting the Nerubians, much like the Scarlet Crusade in the name of fighting the Scourge. And finally, a brief note on hero talents. To me, these are a fantastic addition to the game as some new passive skills in the War Within. Yet again, it's worth noting this is my experience as a Death Knight main, so as I level alts, maybe this will change my opinion, or I'm sure others can give me some views about their classes. But as a Frost Death Knight, hero talents do not feel complicated in the slightest. It doesn't feel like I need to read several guides or Google the best tree to go with. I can simply choose what I want to be using and have fun, incorporating them into my playstyle. And I think that's how they were intended as a useful and fun addition to the game, and it really does remind me of what original talents were meant to be. Something that tops off your class and gives you that extra bit of edge. We still have the original talent tree issue of too much complexity at times, but hero talents really do feel like a good addition that doesn't overwhelm you, and so far mine look visually pretty great and I'm having good fun with them. So overall, these are some of my first impressions of the War Within. I've really been enjoying myself and I'm currently trying to just gear up and run some heroic dungeons, farm some renown and get ready for raiding. I think the general introduction to leveling in the expansion is great overall, and I don't want to shy away from giving the War Within its flowers that it deserves. Yet obviously we have seen other expansions start great and progress in a downward spiral, so that is something to keep in mind and not go too overboard with the praise. I mean, it has only been a week, and there are aspects to the War Within that I've mentioned throughout this video that do pull it back in some ways. But overall, I'm pretty happy with the experience I've had, and I'm excited to see what comes next. So be sure to let me know how you've been finding the War Within in the comments below, and if you're enjoying yourself too. Yeah, till next time, take care out there, and I'll see you on the next one. As always, if you're new here, feel free to like and subscribe. And on that note, I think I'll say ta-ra for now, and I'll see you later.